This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Tuesday, October 13th. This is Africa 54. Due to the global outbreak of coronavirus, Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees. So our broadcast will look a little different today and in the near future as we, out of an abundance of caution, reduce our staffing at VOA headquarters here in Washington. We're working to help keep you informed about what's going on, and we appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. We begin in Central Africa, where his friends say he died of long-term sadness, but malnutrition was also a factor in the death of an 18-year-old inmate, according to prison officials. He is one of dozens to die at a prison in the Democratic Republic of Congo due to a lack of food. We get more on the distressing story in this Reuters news report.
Friends of Moussa say he died of sorrow, but the director of the Democratic Republic of Congo jail where he passed away, Camille Nzonzi Mukonyo, says malnutrition was a contributing factor, as the 18-year-old did not have visitors to bring him meals.
The
people in that state are the desperate ones who have no visitors, and they don't get anything extra. Those who don't get visitors only eat what is available at the prison.
Moussa is one of more than 50 inmates who have died of malnutrition at the crowded main prison in Bunia, in DRC's northeast, since the start of the year, according to the United Nations. He was serving a year in jail, having been convicted of rape. Fellow inmate Datsuvi Ali said the teenager's family couldn't visit him because the distance was too far.
He was very worried. His condition deteriorated after a week. He died after being taken to the general hospital. He was a good friend.
Built to house around 250 inmates, the Bunia Central Prison's concrete walls hold 5 times that number. Food is budgeted based on its capacity, not its population, meaning those without outside help rarely get more than 1 meal a day. And the problem is widespread.
Well, malnutrition is rife in prisons across Congo.
Thomas Fessy is a researcher for Human Rights Watch.
It comes as no surprise when we know that government funds have been delayed for months. If it wasn't for emergency aid coming from charities or local groups and churches, most detainees wouldn't be fed at present.
The government also says more needs to be done. Human Rights Minister Andre Lite said it was an undeniable fact that more effort needed to go into the management of Congo's prisons.
That report was from Reuters News. In recent months, unpredictable, intense floods have washed across parts of Kenya, Sudan, Ethiopia, and several other East and Central African countries, ruining homes and livelihoods. At the same time, people and governments are battling a global pandemic. VOA's Anita Powell spoke to those affected in parts of East Africa.
Paradise in peril. As the world battles a pandemic, large swaths of the African continent have been submerged by floods. This is the scene in the eastern Ugandan city of Jinja, along the shores of Lake Victoria. Since March, flooding has left more than 400 people dead in East Africa. In Uganda, Catholic Relief Services estimates that as many as 580,000 people are affected, from nice lakeshore homes in Kampala to small farms along the Kenya border.
And you're a smallholder farmer who normally benefits from farming on a riverbank, and suddenly there's this raging flash flood that comes down the hills and mountains because of this very intense rainfall. You lose everything.
In the town of Jinja, radio host and environmental activist John Hillary says flooding doesn't just destroy homes, it ruins the very fabric that holds society together.
The public hospital, the only public hospital in the Chilembe region, completely destroyed. So people, as a result of the floods, got sick, but they could not get anywhere else to go to because the hospital had been destroyed.
Githui says heavy rainfall is normal in East Africa. What isn't is the frequency and intensity seen lately. He says Uganda is facing a triple threat that's making it even harder for groups to help.
We have the locusts, we have all the floods, And then on top of everything else, we have COVID-19. And so it's been, for the affected people, it's been an especially hard year, to be on a lockdown and be affected by floods. And then because of the lockdown, accessing the support and the relief that they are entitled to.
Hillary, who has a radio show, speaks often about climate change. He grew up on a farm, so for him, this is personal.
Over time, we have noticed that because of what I think is negligence, we've been involved in practices that have completely destroyed our rain cycle. Our climate is deteriorating every other day. I'm only 26. I have seen over time my world deteriorating. I don't want to see the same for my children.
This, he says, is a living nightmare. This is his home, and he wants future generations to see its beauty too. Anita Powell, VOA News, Johannesburg.
The head of Nigeria's police has announced that its controversial SARS police unit is being disbanded. This was prompted by mass protests against the squad's alleged brutality. Angela Okumadu has the details.
Nigeria's Special Anti-Robbery Squad has been dissolved with immediate effect, the country's head of police said on Sunday. A move prompted by days of protests against alleged brutality by the controversial unit.
Stop killing our boyfriends, stop killing our children, stop! Mothers are crying, stop killing them!
The protest came after a video that circulated last week showing alleged members of SARS shooting a man dead in Delta State.
Today, not tomorrow, and SARS now. I can go punish you. I punish you right now.
For years, Nigerians, particularly the young, have accused SARS of heavy-handed methods and say officers regularly targeted, beat and extorted money from them. An Amnesty International report in June documented 82 alleged cases of SARS mistreating, torturing and extrajudicially executing detainees. On Sunday, a statement said the police would respond to the yearnings of the people and that members of SARS would be redeployed. A new strategy to tackle its remit of fighting armed robbery, kidnapping and violent crime will be announced. But among protesters, there is skepticism. And on Sunday, police used water cannon to disperse hundreds of protesters in the capital, Abuja. Critics say police officials and politicians have said they were disbanding or reforming SARS multiple times in recent years with little visible change.
That was Reuters' Angela Okumadu reporting. Liberian supporters of President George Weah's ruling Congress for Democratic Change say they are planning a protest for Wednesday. Liberia is about to enter a period of protests and counter-protests ahead of the country's December special senatorial election. The opposition collaborating political parties is expected to hold the first of a series of protests on October 28th. The Council of Patriots, which is also part of the opposition, is planning another protest on November 16th to highlight, among other issues, what the group calls a wave of violence against peaceful citizens by ruling party hoodlums and state security actors. Ben Togbah, national chairman of the ruling CDC Council of Patriots, denies opposition claims that ruling party supporters have been violent. He says Wednesday's protest is to alert the international community about what he says are men engaged in troublemaking, especially opposition leaders and their surrogates. As the world's attention is focused on the presidential election in America, another important vote for a key position is generating controversy in Africa. Chadian politician Moussa Faki Mahamat is running unopposed for re-election as chairman of the African Union Commission. Critics say his run is undemocratic and they are seeking to extend the nomination deadline to November. Here again is VOA's Anita Powell reporting from Johannesburg.
African Union Commission Chairman Moussa Faki Mahamat is running unopposed for re-election as Africa's top diplomat. But that uncontested race has provoked outrage from observers of the 55-member African Union, which they say is failing to represent the needs of the continent's 1.3 billion people. Critics of the Ethiopia-based organization are lobbying to postpone the vote at least 6 months to let more candidates come forward. The author of a petition by the Coalition of Supporters Unions of Africa says the AU did that 4 years ago, when there were only 3 candidates for that seat. He spoke to VOA via Google Hangouts.
How come that 4 years down the line, at the same time, we are having only 1 candidate, and people are telling us that that is representative enough? If 3 wasn't representative enough, how can 1 be representative enough?
Analyst Lisa Lovaudran of the Institute for Security Studies says this vote, cast by African heads of state, not by the general population, is important.
The AU Commission chairperson also has to represent the continent on the world stage, basically, when it comes to Africa's relations with the European Union, with China, with the US, with the UN. And he has quite a lot of leeway, I would say.
That's why, says Pan-African activist Daniel Mabonu, it's critical to get a leader who truly represents the continent. He supports the petition to delay the vote. He spoke to VOA from Nairobi via Google Hangouts.
He has displayed a lot of incompetency in the organization and running of the AU, of the African Union organization. At the same time, he has been unable to address issues that are facing people of African descent around the world. And there have been allegations of massive fraud at the African Union, corruption, nepotism, which governs the appointment of people to different positions. Over the years, we have seen that the African Union has failed to attain the objectives that it was founded on.
So if not Mahamat, then who? Critics say one candidate, the AU's former ambassador to the U.S., a Zimbabwean national, has been sidelined after she was removed from that position last year. Both critics also claim the AU has been heavily influenced by former colonial leader France. Since 2002, 4 of the 5 commission chairpersons have hailed from Francophone nations.
Just by the uproar that came around after, the purported sack of Madame Arikana Chiobori, I would say, and my organization says, that Faki Mahamat is a failure. He is not somebody that should lead Africa for another 4 years. And we want a change. Now, come to think of it, Madame Arikana Chiobori herself has filed an application for nomination to become, a runner for that same position. And we have a situation where her nomination has gotten lost at the AU headquarters. And that is very, very strange.
The AU has not been able to meet in person in recent months because of the global pandemic. The petition to delay the election has gotten 16,000 signatories, Ababrese says. If granted, it would move the vote into early 2021. Anita Powell, VOA News, Johannesburg.
Amnesty International says Tanzanian President John Magufuli is building a formidable arsenal of laws that are being used to stifle all forms of dissent ahead of the country's October 28th presidential election. President Magufuli is seeking a second 5-year term. In a report released Monday, Amnesty International says Magufuli's government is weaponizing laws to create an uneven playing field for the opposition, silencing local and international media and civil society organizations. Tanzanian government officials were not immediately available for comment. Dipros Muchena, Amnesty International Regional Director for East and Southern Africa, says his organization is calling on Magufuli to reverse this tide of stifling dissent and create a more politically equal society. We would like to hear what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, the fight against a spike in gender-based violence during the COVID-19 lockdown in East and Southern Africa. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Africa 54. U.S. Senate Republicans kicked off a sprint Monday to confirm Judge Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. Just 3 weeks before Election Day, Senate Judiciary Committee hearings began amid continuing concerns about the impact coronavirus infections will have on Barrett's final nomination vote. VOA's congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson has more.
Arriving on Capitol Hill, which has been shut down for the past week in an effort to contain the spread of the coronavirus, Barrett took her first moment before the full Senate Judiciary Committee to explain her judicial philosophy.
Courts are not designed to solve every problem or right every wrong in our public life. The policy decisions and value judgments of government must be made by the political branches, elected by and accountable to the people. The public should not expect courts to do so, and courts should not try.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has a narrow margin of error to fill the vacancy left by the death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg last month and confirm President Donald Trump's nominee before Election Day on November 3rd. The Democratic vice presidential candidate, who also is a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, said the process rejects the will of American voters.
A clear majority of Americans want whomever wins this election to fill this seat.
But even with some Republican members of the committee testing positive for COVID-19 10 days ago, the Senate is moving forward.
There's nothing unconstitutional about this process. This is a vacancy that's occurred through a tragic loss of a great woman, and we're going to fill that vacancy with another great woman.
Democrats say Trump is rushing to seat Barrett for two reasons coming up in just the next month.
President Trump has made it clear he wants another of his appointees on the Supreme Court before the election because he anticipates court challenges over the vote, especially over mail-in balloting, which he has repeatedly attacked without any substance. President Trump has indicated he'd be perfectly happy to have a close election decided by a 6-3 conservative majority Supreme Court rather than by the votes of the American people.
And just a week after Election Day, the Supreme Court will hear a key case on the Affordable Care Act, the Obama administration's health care law.
The Trump administration is arguing that the act is unconstitutional and in effect to take away the Affordable Care Act and the health insurance it provides to millions of Americans as a means of unconstitutionality. So Justice Barrett will be one of the deciding factors in this major issue.
Democrats plan to focus on Barrett's possible deciding vote on health care.
Health care coverage for millions of Americans is at stake with this nomination.
But they have already faced Republican warnings not to make the faith of the devout Catholic mom of 7 an issue.
We've read stories about your Catholic lifestyle, stories about how you raise your children, stories about how you adopted your children, stories about your Catholic doctrinal beliefs, over and over and over questioning whether you have, I guess, the independence to be a judge, a justice on the United States Supreme Court.
Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden, who also is Catholic, said Barrett should not face questions about her religion.
No, her faith should not be considered.
The Senate Judiciary Committee is on track to approve the Barrett nomination by October 22nd, setting up the possibility of a full Senate floor vote as early as the week of October 26th, a week before Election Day. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Washington.
In our health report, observers say many countries are reporting a surge in cases of gender-based violence due to COVID-19 lockdown measures. Data from the United Nations reveals that 1 in 3 women worldwide are experiencing either intimate partner violence or non-partner sexual violence during their lifetime. In Africa, the Eastern and Southern Africa regions have high rates of sexual violence against women and girls. According to the United Nations Population Fund, the high rate in the region is maintained by the persistence of harmful gender norms, alcohol use, and overall increased poverty, violence in urban slum areas and conflict areas. For more on gender-based violence, Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu spoke with Dr. Kemi Da Silva Ibru, an OBGYN specialist and founder of the Women at Risk International Foundation in Nigeria.
When we discuss the issue of gender-based violence, our statistics are such that 1 in 4 girls before the age of 18 would have experienced at least 1 violent sexual encounter. And over 70% would experience more than 1. So when you look at the math, what we see is an average of over 10,000 cases every day in Nigeria where a woman or a young girl is enduring a violent sexual encounter. So many of the young girls and women that we see have been physically attacked. So we're dealing with physical injuries. Then we're dealing with the mental and the emotional injuries that come with these horrific attacks. And then from a medical point of view, you're looking at an increase in the number of cases of possibly HIV or other sexually transmitted diseases because many of these attacks go unprotected when we're dealing with penetrative sexual intercourse. We're also dealing with unwanted pregnancies. And of course, then we're dealing with the long-term medical impact, perhaps, of these attacks that as it affects a woman's fertility. With regards to her family, as we all know, women are typically the glue in their homes. And so an adverse impact on her adversely impacts on the rest of the family.
What are some of the reasons why women will stay in violent relationships?
Well, in this part of the world, in Africa, specifically in Nigeria, the primary reason is the woman's mindset. Women are socialized from a very young age to be subjugated by men. Sadly, young girls see it with regards to their parents and perhaps their mothers, and mothers encourage young girls because it's culturally acceptable to accept their lot in life when they're in families and situations of abuse. And as I mentioned earlier, she doesn't have an enabling community that even empowers her to leave. She doesn't have the resources because unfortunately we are dealing with a low middle income country with a lot of challenges, both politically and economically.
So what type of interventions have you implemented that you have found effective?
We work under the health, education, and community service pillars. So with the health, our intervention is providing a sexual assault referral center or rape crisis center in the epicenter of Lagos State, one of the 36 states of Nigeria. And we also provide satellite services in other states. And with this center, we're able to offer free services with the provision of medical and forensic medical examinations. We're able to offer tests such as HIV and pregnancy tests. We're able to give the post-exposure HIV drugs and the morning after pill if we're fortunate enough to see the survivor in a timely fashion. And then we can start our emotional healing with counseling. With our educational pillar, the idea is prevention, going into elementary and tertiary institutions and designing and implementing specific programs to address the needs of the different groups. So with a girl child, for instance, in an elementary school, the focus is on preventing sexual violence, perhaps, and empowering her and giving her the necessary information and knowledge that she needs. With regards to the boy, perhaps it's changing his mindset, because perhaps he already has a mindset of a potential perpetrator because he's socialized in a home of violence where he doesn't know better. And in the tertiary institutions, we're dealing with young adults who now are dealing with the challenges, not just of sexual violence from the home, but also in schools and on campuses. And then finally, the community service was important because many parts of Africa, including Nigeria, is still very much in the rural areas. So we need to take those programs into these rural communities. And there we identify community leaders, we empower them with training, and we then ask them to go back into their communities to raise awareness and assist.
You talked about prevention with the young boy in school, and that's such an important part of the whole idea of preventing gender-based violence. When we prevent it from a younger age, what about the adult men?
Our focus when it comes to men is actually the police force, the law enforcement officers. We have found in Nigeria that a lot of times police officers don't have the necessary sensitivity training, or perhaps even the necessary information on referral and protocols in addressing survivors of rape. And so we embarked on a program where we started to go into different police stations to train these police officers, because they are the first point of call when it comes to reporting these cases. I believe violence against women and girls across the world is one of the most pervasive forms of a human rights violation. And like Hillary Clinton said, this is still the unfinished business of the 21st century. And I believe it's time that we finish it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kemi Da Silva-Ibru, for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, Linda.
That was Africa 54 health correspondent Lenomudu speaking with Dr. Kemi Da Silva-Ibru, an OBGYN specialist and founder of the Women at Risk International Foundation in Nigeria. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, we thank you for watching.
Being part of Our Voices is about more than just sitting here and talking about women's issues. It's about listening to them
and bringing their opinions to the table and making sure their voices are heard.
Because our lived experiences, our stories, and our voices will help shape the next generation.